Oh, hey, I'm glad you're here. If you listen to VHS, then you won't be shocked to know that I love to gab on all things I'm passionate about, everything from experimental and electronic music to Derek Jarman to Godfrey Ho movies. However, I also love to sit back and learn about something from another person's passion. There's something so satisfying about learning specific things that speak to a person, and believe me, especially when talking about this topic, there are some very interesting specifics. For example, I didn't know Data had a cat, wrote a poem about it, and then somebody did this.
I've written my next poem in honor of my cat. I call it Ode to Spot. Felis catus is your taxonomic nomenclature, an endothermic quadruped, carnivorous by nature. Your visual, olfactory, and auditory senses contribute to your hunting skill and natural defenses. I find myself intrigued by your subvocal oscillations, a singular development of cat communications that obviates your basic hedonistic predilection for a rhythmic stroking of your fur to demonstrate affection. A tail is quite essential for your acrobatic talents. You would not be so agile if you lacked its counterbalance. And when not being utilized to aid in locomotion, it often serves to illustrate the state of your emotion. The complex levels of behavior you display connote a fairly well-developed cognitive array, and though you are not sentient and do not comprehend, I nonetheless consider you a true and valued friend.
Now that is very specific. Sometimes in the video store, customers would be so excited about a sequel of something like, say, 007 or Indiana Jones, and they would passionately talk about it, their hopes for the next one, what they loved about the last one. And that's what I love, when people just share what they're passionate about without holding anything back. Which I should say this guest had to hold things back, because I tasked them with talking about an entire film franchise in one episode. So I think they did an excellent job being concise about what they appreciate about each film as we keep moving through. If you would like more in-depth content on the subject, then please check out the podcast that the guest mentions in the episode. Speaking of episodes, let's get right into this one. The guest is Foz Rotten. The films are the entire Star Trek franchise, and this is VH Greetings and salutations. This is VHS, and I'm your host, Dirk Marshall. Every so often, I like to do an episode where I know the least on a subject. I don't know a lot, usually, but something like this where I can learn from a person's affection for something. This is one of those episodes where I found someone whose passion for something inspired them creatively in their own life, and that's something I always want to hear about. The topic for this episode is the Star Trek film franchise, and my guest is Foz Rotten. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me today. I'm a big fan of this show. I listen all the time in my drives.
Oh, thank you so much. That's very kind. Anyone looking for you online can find you at fozrotten.com or on social media, Foz Rotten, right? F-O-Z.
Everywhere.
Okay. And you're also a vocalist, I'm guessing,
Yeah.
songwriter as well, for Boldly Go, a Star Trek-themed punk band.
Yeah, Boldly Go. We like to say that we're a Star Trek themed punk band, but if you don't listen to punk, you will like the Star Trek references. And if you're not a big Star Trek guy, you will like us as just a punk band. So just take the Misfits. If you don't watch horror movies, but you still like the Misfits, there you go.
That's awesome. I love that. You've also been kind enough to allow us to play tracks from your debut album, United Federation of Punk. So intermittently, people will hear your music through this episode, which rules.
Thank you. Yes, we released it at the main end of 2000, so it's officially been like 4 years now that it's been out. But you know how the long journey goes. We started in 2019, and you know we have played all around the East Coast, down south, and stuff. Would love to do West Coast one day and everything. Take it out there.
Yeah.
But we love to do everything from conventions to bar shows to all ages shows, anywhere we can get in.
Yeah, it's awesome. And like I told you previously when we were messaging back and forth, what I really love about it is like in the early 2000s, my wife was in a band. She was playing with a lot of groups, and you would come across sort of, niche, novelty kind of things like Arno Core. I don't know if you know Arno Core at all.
I don't know. What's that?
So, ARNO space CORP. It's an Arnold Schwarzenegger themed sort of punk metal band. So they have,
Oh my God. So it's just one band, but they started like their whole genre off of it?
basically, it's like what you're doing, but with Arnold Schwarzenegger. And they all portray Arnold Schwarzenegger on stage, which is weird.
Is it from different movies?
Yeah. So they have a Total Recall one where the chorus of the song is "Get Your
Oh
Ass
my
Back to
God.
Mars" and things like that. So
I
it's
love it.
yeah, it's really great.
My name is not Quad. What the fuck did they do wrong? Suddenly I see I don't belong. Ask about the future, don't know the past. Thoughts in my mind don't seem to last. My whole life is just a dream. Now I know what they could have been. They want to climb the Mount of Oz with wholesale memories. I'm in charge. Get your ass to balls.
But what I really appreciate about your band is the musicality of it. There's parts in these 1 minute to 3 minute long songs where the guitar is like a legit thing. It's not just like strumming 3 notes and just having
Right.
a novelty phrase shouted out. It's really good, and people will hear that in this episode. But I just wanted to pay you the compliment while you're here.
The entire band is full of great musicians. I lucked out big time when back in 2019, I just got a bug up my butt one day. I love horror punk. I love all this different punk rock that has themes. And I'm like, why is there no Star Trek punk? Because I want to say and promote, there has been Star Trek bands since the beginning of Star Trek.
Yeah.
We are good friends with 5 Year Mission. They're more of like an alternative indie rock band.
Mhm.
They are fantastic. Check them out. There's Warp 11, which is more rock and roll punk, kind of punk tinge, but all these bands, like none of them you would call straight up punk rock.
Mhm.
But there's so many great bands. And in the documentary Trekkies 2, if you haven't seen that one, I recommend both of those docs. There's a few bands in there. And I was just like, well, I would love to be one of those bands one day, but I want to do it like pure punk rock.
Yeah.
So I just want to get that out there. And I just lucked out that I put it out into the internet one day that I would love to start a Star Trek punk rock band. And everybody that has been involved with the band since has been like amazing musicians. I'm just a lucky guy.
I love that. Now, people listening, if you're finding this and you love Star Trek, and that's why you found this episode, then you hear me not know much on the subject. Fear not, I will not be making jokes where I confuse Star Wars and Star Trek. This is a genuine celebration of a subject. That's what we do on VHS. And the format will be that we will start with the first film, head on through to the most recent, with 2 brief stops along the way where I watched films because of our conversation that Foz and I were having. And at the end, we'll share our personal rankings of the franchise, mine which is coming from my older brother, who's one of the biggest Star Trek fans I've ever met. In fact, he played the Star Trek role-playing game by FASA from like 82 or 83, where he even built a 3-tier plexiglass playing board, so if your piece was cloaked, you knew where it was in relationship to other ships.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I've never played that. That's great.
It was super fun. I was kind of a jerk because I'm the younger kid, and I just kept putting everything into photon torpedoes, which left me exposed and made the game quite short. But it was fun. It's a fun game to play. Now, with all that being said, I do have to say one thing, and that is between the robes in another series and the PJs in this one, no matter which sci-fi series you prefer, there's one thing that we can all agree on in the future, and that's comfort. these guys, these outfits that everyone wears in science fiction, they're so like breathable fibers and like loose fitting, or in here kind of form fitting. Just something I noticed while watching this. I was like, these people all look like they were comfortable the entire time. Maybe not the Borg, but we'll get to that.
They're collective consciousness. So maybe just like the first person who started with the Borg really liked that outfit and that aesthetic, and then it just was like, as you became a Borg, it's like, oh yeah, this is cool.
Yeah, that's probably what happened. So Foz, let's start with, where did your love of Star Trek begin?
I'm a TNG kid. There's a whole group of us out there in the world now that are hitting our 40s. And we were kids, whenever TNG came on. And we would catch TOS reruns and be like, oh, that's cool.
So can you break down for anyone listening that's not a fan of Star Trek, what TNG is?
Sorry, I'm so like...
Yes.
I'm so into the Star Trek lore that like I forget sometimes. I have to break it down more. So The Next Generation...
Got it.
Which came out in the 80s, was the show that I grew up on. That was the one with Picard and Worf and everybody, Data. And, you would see reruns in the 80s all the time of the original series Star Trek. And while you liked Kirk and Spock and everybody knew them, there was something about The Next Generation that really belonged to you, and it was your own. It wasn't your dad's Star Trek, so some people would say. It wasn't as 1960s and felt like, back in the day. You were watching modern, this is the future. And then everything that came along with that, you would grow with, like when Deep Space Nine came on, when Voyager came on, when the Enterprise came on, etc. And the movies as well, which we will be talking about today. That's where a lot of people that grew up on like The Next Generation got to know the original series, was through all of the TOS movies, as we call them, until it reached whenever The Next Generation went off the air and started their own series of films. And to me, it's a growing experience. Like a lot of people say they grew up on Star Wars. I grew up on Star Trek. My bedtime used to be 9:00, and it was the same time that The Next Generation would come on, and I would always fight with my mom like every night. Like, no, I need to stay up until 10 so I can finish this episode, because it wasn't that I just wanted to stay up. It was that I had to stay up to finish this episode, and my mother still reminds me of that all the time.
I love that. And now there are many sci-fi series, be it literature, television, or films, but what would you say are like signatures when you think of Star Trek? Like, what is the flavor or tone of a Star Trek film, since we're talking films? And when you look at one, is there areas that it needs to succeed, or what is it that you look for?
Now, especially with the movies, they try to go tinge heavier on the action, whereas a lot of people complain that like Star Wars or stuff like that would be more action films, right? Or whatever the big sci-fi movie at your local theater is more action themed. Especially on the TV show, but the best movies have this in them also, is the morals and messages that come along with it. It's not just the flashy CGI or the flashy old optical illusions and everything like that. It's just not the cool costumes. It's not just, wow, look at that alien. It's what that you're putting in it. It's the speeches from Picard. It's the lessons that you learn along the way in Star Trek is what keeps you there. For me, I can look at any situation in my life and look back at a episode of Star Trek and really think back and go, oh yeah, that kind of prepared you for that situation, which might sound a little hokey to some people, might sound a little corny, but you got to find it somewhere. Mm-hmm. Why not Star Trek?
Oh, I love that. I'm going to try not to say that so much. I've already said I love that probably 10 times, but I do, and I can't help it. All right, well, let's hear a song from Boldly Go. This is Trekkie Punks.
We'll go in the transporter. All they
And we're back, and we're going to start with our crawl through the films, starting at the first one, 1979, Star Trek, the motion picture. Little notes that I have down here that the show was canceled in 69, and Roddenberry lobbied to have the film made to continue the story, but then they weren't interested. It was going to be a television show again. It was going to be Phase 2, I guess is what they were going to call it.
Yeah, they referenced it as Phase 2, and they had full storylines. They had, all kinds of stuff. People hired for it, all kinds of stuff. That's a whole other podcast you can make about that.
Yeah, and then I was reading that it was the success of like Close Encounters and Star Wars that then they thought, oh, this could be a movie. We had this VHS tape in my dad's video store that I grew up in, and I never watched it because it says Star Trek the movie. It made me think it was like a TV movie. I didn't know for the longest time that it was like the first, like it made it to theaters, basically.
Right. Well, this was one of the biggest budgeted movies back in the day, and it actually was successful and it did make money back. But the reason it was so high of a budget, even before they actually started shooting the movie, which would have had a high budget alone, was they took all the money that had been put in from the studio that went towards Phase 2 and all these multiple, like there was going to be a TV movie, there was going to be a regular movie, no, Phase 2. All that budget went towards the budget of this movie ultimately.
Wow.
And for a long time, this was like one of the biggest budgeted movies ever. But what you see on the screen is a spectacle. That's why I like to refer to this movie as. It's eye candy for anyone who ever wanted to spend 5 minutes staring at a starship. It is fantastic, and the movie itself is really good. It's a little more slow paced than most people are into. You got to be kind of okay with a slow burn, as people say nowadays. But I think Spock stuff in there has never been better. I think everybody is on their A game when they came in. Whereas some of the movies later, you could pick apart and be like, was Shatner really into this all the way? Whenever it came to that first movie, and yeah, there had been an animated series for a couple of years in the 70s. This was just a show that most of them hadn't done much after. But then through the conventions and through the animated series, Star Trek had grown into this big thing. So everyone knew when they came back, this was their chance. They were getting a second chance at their careers, basically. So everyone put everything into this. Gene, the studio, everybody. And you can see it in there. As far as 70s sci-fi, this is one of my favorites, even if you are saying it's a bit slower than, like, say, Star Wars proper. But I love this movie, if for nothing else, just to look at.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's so interesting because I didn't know your entry point was TNG. Did I do that right? Okay.
Yes.
So because I had the reruns of the first show all the time, I would see it at my grandparents' house and stuff like that. That was my relationship to Star Trek until we get to some of these later films. So like Kirk fighting the snake dude with the rock.
The Gorn.
Yeah, that one. That was like really cool to me as a kid. But like the rest of the show, I don't know, it was a lot of older people, talking and stuff. Like you were talking about action and sci-fi. I, as a kid, definitely wanted more action. So even when I saw things like Star Wars and they're having like their space meetings and stuff, I was like, I don't want this. Like, I want the aliens and the action. So hearing you talk about like the morals and the purposeful speeches and things totally makes sense to me, and why it was lost on me as a kid. Because in watching some of these films, which we're recording on the 1st of January, I spent the last day of 2024 watching Star Trek movies that I hadn't seen before. And
oh, wow.
And really with open eyes, appreciating the score of a lot of them, like the swell of the music, the way you see the ship, the way it's revealed in shots, just the reverence of the characters delivering monologues and stuff. These early films, how cool Shatner was. I didn't think he was cool in the show, but in the movie, he's like got a swagger to him in some of them where I was like, holy smokes. Like, and I, as a listener of the podcast, I'm sure you know this, but I love when a cast gets to come back together over time and you see these people that you're just rooting for, like, and that's what this assemblage of people from the Doc through Spock and everybody in between is like every time it shows them, you're kind of like, oh right, yes, like that person's gonna say this line, or I don't know. This is the film that kind of started it all, and I didn't see it till way later. So
You brought something to mind. I didn't want to move away from this movie without mentioning. You said the Doctor Bones. My favorite anything of Bones ever was whenever they transport him against his will on the transporter in the first movie,
yeah,
and he's straight up Disco Bones.
yeah,
And that's my favorite. And there has recently been a model of Disco Bones come out. It's a little pricey, but I would love one day to
oh
get that just to
wow,
have on my desk.
yeah. Do you collect a lot of Star Trek memorabilia?
Yes and no. I collect more than some, but definitely not as much as others.
Oh sure, sure.
It's more of I'm selective.
Hmm.
I will get certain figures and then buy that. I'm a completist. If I start with a set, I have to finish it. But I'm totally okay saying, as much as I would love this, I'm not going to invest $100 into this and the next 10 things that they come out with.
Yeah,
Because in the Star Trek collecting world, you can spend thousands and still not have enough, or I luckily can just back off and say I don't need it at all. But I've also got stuff since I was a kid, just stuff along the way, stuff at conventions. I say all this. I have right now a shipment to me of like my new Star Trek calendars for the year. You got to have your wall calendar. You got to have your daily calendar. You got to have
nice.
your pocket calendar. And so I got that coming to me, and I was just looking at some new shirts. Shirts are so addictive. That is one of the greatest things about Star Trek. You can find a shirt for anything.
Hmm. No, that's very true. It's difficult to move on, but do you have anything you have to throw out before we get to the second film?
I love Spock in this first movie,
Yep.
but Disco Bones takes the cake.
Takes the cake. I love it. Okay, Disco Bones. Carrying on to the second film in the series from 1982 is Star Trek II Wrath of Khan, which up until a week ago I thought was the third movie. That's how embarrassing this is for me. For years, I could picture the VHS tape in our store and it says Star Trek III Wrath of Khan, which is not a real thing. I don't know how my brain did that. It's very embarrassing, but it's true. And so this movie is the one I saw the most as a kid. Obviously, 82, I was not very old, so I saw this later, but this was the film that if someone said name a Star Trek movie, this is the one I'm going to name. It's the most
Right.
quoted, I think. It has one of those really iconic moments that even non-Star Trek fans know what you're talking about.
I shall leave you as you left me, as you left her, marooned for all eternity in the center of a dead planet. Buried alive, buried alive.
I thought this was really interesting. You probably knew this. The director is Nicholas Meyer, by the way, but that it was a sequel to the first film, but also a sequel to Space Seed episode from 1967. I didn't know that. It's fascinating.
Yeah, this was a direct sequel to Space Seed, where you first meet Khan. It's the only episode to have Khan in it.
Mm.
But it was just such a famous and well done episode of the original series that they went with that for a sequel idea. They brought back Montalban to do the character, and what would it be like to be stranded on this planet for all this time, and basically build up the whole like I will have my revenge idea upon this already some would call a madman, and he's now got this opportunity to hunt down Kirk and have his revenge. And so here's something that I really like about the movie that I don't know if you noticed. They are never on screen together.
Yeah, that's
They
so
only
fascinating.
appear in screens to each other, but never in the same room.
Why is that?
I don't know. I really don't know the behind the scenes of that, why that was,
Huh.
but I find it so interesting
Mhm.
that the whole idea of like he's going to either kill him or die, and he's never even in the same room with him. But he's just obsessed. And it's just like his number one and behind him is saying to him the whole time, like, we have this powerful starship. let's just leave and go. We don't need to kill Kirk. Well, just let this be. And he won't take that for an answer. He could have went and done anything.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a movie about obsession.
Mm-hmm.
And then also your past. The movie really is about your past catching up with you. Whenever he, meets his child, whenever he sees the woman that could have been his wife, Kirk, could have had this whole different life, but he was dedicated to his career. And it was the same with Khan. He could have went and done anything, but he was dedicated and on this path, and it led to his end. So it's a great movie. What's funny is you said that you thought the original the movie was going to be a TV movie. Well, the reason that part 2 got made was the first one was such a success, but they didn't think they could match that again. They were just going to do a TV movie. Well, the director said, okay, give me the budget for the TV movie, and I'm just going to go and make a theatrical film. And if you don't like it, it's a TV movie. And if you like it, it's a theatrical film. And you got what some would arguably say is the best Star Trek movie ever. And like what you can do whenever you set your mind to something.
Mm-hmm. That's fascinating. Another thing I found while looking at this series again is like the television series had guest stars. It was a popular thing to do in the time of TV, especially back then. And the movies continue that tradition. Obviously they have to have people play the baddies or whatever, but the actors that step into the world of Star Trek are phenomenal actors. And for every film, I would be like, oh my gosh, there's so-and-so. And then there's this person. And like, I don't know what that says about the strength of either the writing for Star Trek or just how iconic it is that you would have so many talented, like, thespians and stuff stepping into these roles, where someone's going to put like a mountain range on your forehead or something. Like, it's just like, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like sci-fi and things like Star Trek or, even the fantasy stuff back in the day, not now where you get millions and millions of dollars, but like, it would be easy to make fun and poke jokes at these things, but that's not the case for some of these people. They were like taking it very seriously, and that adds to the weight of the scenes,
It's not one of the movies, but we were talking about The Next Generation earlier. That's how you got Whoopi Goldberg coming into the second season. Well, she was in her prime, like the biggest toast of the town in 80s Hollywood. And they asked her, what do you want to do next? And she said, I want to be on Star Trek. And they had only done one season of The Next Generation. And bam, she was in that first episode of the second season. She's not in every episode. And you always see it has a guest starring role credit on there, but they use her so well that you never even think about that she wasn't on that first season, that she's very rarely in it in some seasons, but like when they use her, she's such an integral part to the scene. She's not cracking jokes. She's got some of the most dramatic scenes with the other characters, and everybody wanted to work with her. That is how they got people, is like people were fans and wanted to work on this show.
I remember seeing her in some kind of hat.
Yeah, the hats.
Yeah, and was like, I did a double take because I was like, that's Whoopi Goldberg from like Jumping Jack Flash and stuff. And I was really shocked. We're going to crawl a little closer to The Next Generation by approaching Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock, which I thought was the second film and up until a week ago, from 1984. This was directed by Leonard Nimoy. I would have never known that he directed the movie about Spock. That's fascinating.
So that's a whole thing right there. Nimoy almost didn't come back for the original movie, but after he settled a dispute with over his likeness for all the Spock stuff that had been done since the series had ended, he finally came back to the originals, to the movie. And after the movie, they didn't think they were going to get him back again. And it was kind of like, hey, what if we pitch him the idea that we kill Spock at the end of part 2? And so he's done. And then he was like, yeah, I like this. So it went over so well, they were like, well, how do we get Spock back? Well, the agreement that was made was he was offered to direct. And now keep this in mind as we go a couple more movies forward. Nimoy and Shatner had a clause in their contracts that if one got offered something, the other got offered something. If one got a raise, the other got a raise.
Right, yes. I see what you're setting up.
So whenever he came in to direct, that is how they got him back. And he was okay bringing Spock back. But how do you do that was the question. And so what's funny is the movie is called The Search for Spock. So it kind of ruins when you go see the movie, if you have any question, if they're going to find him.
Right.
Obviously, they're going to find him.
Right. Here's a question. Maybe you know the answer to. I know that Wrath of Khan is this also, it's not just a sequel to Space Seed and the first film, but it's also the start of a trilogy of
Yes.
consisting of Wrath of Khan, Search for Spock, and the next film. Were they written as an arc, or why is it considered a trilogy?
The reason it's considered a trilogy, I mean, they all connect. It's not like there's a huge breakdown. But the end of part 2 where Spock dies and the whole Genesis project and everything is immediately picked up in part 3, where they figure out the Genesis project has worked, and this planet is now being understudy, and then the Klingons go and look for it, and maybe Spock actually had landed there and was coming back to life himself, just like the planet was going through changes. And then at the end of 3, as we go to 4, it is, well, okay, we'll talk about that as well. In part 4, they're having to wrap up part 3 of taking Spock back to Vulcan.
Right.
And so the beginning of part 4 is them wrapping up part 3, just like part 3 was them wrapping up part 2.
Okay.
And that's why it's considered a trilogy. Like with the whole Klingon ship that they end up with at the end of part 3 that goes into part 4. That is like why it's kind of a 1, 2, 3 right there.
Okay, that makes sense. I did not have a chance to rewatch The Search for Spock. I remember it as a kid feeling really slow. I have no idea if that's true. I was young. So what's your feeling on Search for Spock?
We're going to do the rankings later.
Yeah.
And while I don't not like any movie, and I really don't, not like this one, I really do like this one. It's one of my lesser rewatched movies. Doesn't mean I don't like it.
Sure.
And doesn't have great things in it. Like Christopher Lloyd is in it.
Right.
And it was right before he did Doc Brown.
Yeah.
To me, one of my other big things in my life is Back to the Future. Like, I got Back to the Future, everything around me, if you could see behind me. I love Back to the Future. And so to me, he is always Doc Brown. But when he is in this, he's a terrifying Klingon captain. And it's so great. Also in this movie is John Larroquette as the Klingon.
Yeah.
And I'm a big John Larroquette, Night Court, John Larroquette show fan.
Mm-hmm. No, he's great. I mean, I was a big fan of him just finding out he did the voiceover for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
The film which you are about to see is an account of the tragedy which befell a group of 5 youths. In particular, Sally Hardesty and her invalid brother, Franklin. It is all the more tragic in that they were young. But had they lived very, very long lives, they could not have expected, nor would they have wished to see as much of the mad and macabre as they were to see that day. For them, an idyllic summer afternoon drive became a nightmare. The events of that day were to lead to the discovery of one of the most bizarre crimes in the annals of American history, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
I mean, I was just like, if he's doing cool stuff like that, where he was paid like with weed, I think is the story. Then I was like, I like this guy's awesome. And then he was on Night Court and Madhouse, the Kirstie Alley movie with him and
and Stripes. Everybody forgets him in Stripes. How good he was.
Yeah, no, he's great. Okay, Star Trek 3, Search for Spock. Moving on to Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home, 1986. As a kid, I called this the Talking Whale movie. Again, this is directed by Leonard Nimoy. I saw it in theaters.
Oh, great.
Yes, let's see, what did I say? 86. I was 9 years old. And my big takeaway was the punks. And so it's just fitting, before we dive into this movie, let's hear another track from Boldly Go. This is First Contact. And we're back. Let's talk The Voyage Home. What's your feelings on this film?
Okay, this is one of my favorites. This is one of everybody's favorites.
Yep.
Usually, if you don't say Wrath of Khan, you'll say The Voyage Home. But you don't normally even say The Voyage Home. You say the one with the whales.
Yeah.
That's what everybody refers to it as. Okay, so I'm just going to go personal on this.
Yeah.
I was a kid whenever I saw this. This was probably one of the first movies of Star Trek that I saw. I'm sure I'd already seen TNG and was some TOS and was into it. So I'm sure that I went to the video store and pulled this off the shelf. A shout out to my local mom and pop I always went to. It's called Stereo Video.
Nice.
They are still in business as a kind of a stereo store, but not as a video store.
Oh,
It breaks
okay.
my heart every
Yeah.
time I talk to them. But same people own it. Great people. Shout out. So I'm sure I went there and was like, Mom, I want this one. And when I watched it, I had a fascination with punk rockers in movies
Mhm.
before I even knew what punk rock was. So whether it was like Crocodile Dundee 2 or, what RoboCop 3,
Yeah.
whatever the movie with the punkers in it, I was like obsessed with Gleaming the Cube, all that stuff. This is one you always think of with punk rockers in it, with the punk on the bus.
Yep.
So whenever we started the band, I found the punk on the bus, and his name's Kirk Thatcher, and he's so great. The thing is, he's just a regular Hollywood dude that ended up directing Muppets movies. He was like a behind the scenes guy.
Whoa.
And he was working behind the scenes on this movie, and he got put in the part of Punk on the Bus, and he even went and recorded in a studio the song that you hear playing through his boombox.
Yeah.
And you can find that on YouTube. If you search it, you can find that full song on YouTube to listen to. It's very like, if you want to make it, what you would call a parody song, but it's actually pretty good parody. It's very nihilistic, like drop the bomb.
Yeah.
It's just okay, punk rock song. Here we go. And he's so nice. He's so cool. He recently even appeared on Star Trek Picard in season 2. They go back in time to like modern day now. You see him on the bus in that punk rock outfit. So he even reprised his character on Star Trek Picard, the show, just for like a little quick one-off shot to him. And it was so great. But he's part of why I love this movie so much.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
yeah, Star Trek 4, the one with the whales, in any Star Trek, they go back to their modern day for whatever reason. And, this was the movie's version of doing that. And so it's one of the most 80s Star Trek things ever.
Yeah.
And you have the great lines like, can you show me where the nuclear vessels are?
Yeah.
Stuff like that. I always like the part where Scotty picks up the mouse for the 1980s computer and says, hello, computer.
Yeah. Yes. Is this, in your opinion, the movie that has the most humor in it?
Yeah, it's definitely the comedy.
Because I think that's what really got me as a kid, is like, whereas the stoicism of previous films and the weight of the emotional situations didn't speak to me, the silliness in this one, and the comedy, not silliness, but really spoke to me, and the bizarreness, because as a kid I was like, what's with these whales?
Yeah. Anytime Star Trek does comedy, I call it the Trouble with Tribbles.
Yeah.
Because of the great Trouble with Tribbles episode. They just want to be light with it, and this was light. It was fun. It was candy. You want to go eat your popcorn, eat your M&Ms to it. I love this movie so much. But it comes between part 3, which is like really dark. I mean, Kirk's son, who you just met in part 2, dies in part 3.
Yeah.
He's straight up ganked murdered in part 3.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, bye, David. And now you're in part 4, right in the timeline, like a few days later in 1980s, San Francisco, looking for some whales.
Yeah.
and having a good old time. And I don't know, it's the best one to start with, I always say, if you're showing a movie to somebody.
Yeah.
Which might be weird, because it seems like everybody wants to make the argument, well, they're not really doing Star Trek stuff up in space. But I don't know. I loved it as a kid. I think it's a great way to just get in there.
Yeah, no, that's great. I always look for entry points for things like this, because if you start with the first one, like you said, it is slower paced by a lot of things.
Do not show a kid that first movie, please.
Yeah, it just doesn't speak to it. But something like this with the humor, I think, is a great entry point. And it's kind of just become like a beloved film. Even people that aren't, deeply steeped in the world of Star Trek are like, yeah, 4 is fantastic. which brings us to a major blank spot for me, which is 5. The Final Frontier
Yeah.
from 1989, directed by William Shatner. Like you said, anything Leonard gets, William gets, and vice
Yes.
versa. I've never watched this movie. I don't even know the plot of it.
Okay, so
And
you've never watched anything on this. Okay.
I have no idea. When I was looking at the lineage of the films and everything, and I was trying to decide what I could fit in to watch before this conversation, this fell by the wayside. So you're all alone here in the Final
Okay.
Frontier.
Yeah. So this is funny. I just rewatched this. I'm doing I can't believe I haven't mentioned this yet. I'm doing a full franchise rewatch by air date. That means if there was a TNG episode like was aired and then this movie came out, I'll watch this movie right
Oh.
after that TNG episode, and then I go back to TNG and keep watching from there so that I can see everything proper as it came out as the fan watching it. I'm not doing star dates, I'm not doing timeline, I'm doing that specifically. And I just finished season 2 onto season 3 of Star Trek The Next Generation, and this came near the end of Star Trek The Next Generation. So I just watched this movie, and it's when we do the rankings, spoiler alert, it will be at my bottom.
Yeah.
But as I stated earlier,
Hmm.
I don't hate any Star Trek movies. I don't think there's necessarily a bad Star Trek movie. Let's just say this is the weirdest and the least favorable of them. So Shatner, optioned his right that, okay, Leonard had done a couple movies. Now it's his turn. And he, from all accounts, he took it very seriously. He didn't half-ass this. He really wanted this to be good. But it comes off as Shatner didn't really know how to make a Star Trek film. Instead, Shatner made a action type movie, 80s action type movie with lots of one-liners. And he is the action star of the movie. It's a total, I'm the me. This is the movie. And here's my quirky one-liner. Here's the bad guy we're going to face, and I'm going to take him out. Now, I will give him credit. He gave everybody something to do in this movie. One of my favorite horror parts that she ever did was in this movie, which people have seen it. It's the dancing part where she's singing a song and dancing. I thought that was fantastic. He even gave Sulu some okay stuff, which notoriously him and George Takei have always not gotten along very well, and nowadays they won't even be in the same room as each other. So he even gave George Takei some good stuff in this movie. And the best parts of this movie is Bones, Spock, and McCoy. It's always in the original series. That's what you really go for, is Bones, Spock, and McCoy. And some of the best Bones, Spock, and McCoy is in part 5, especially the beginning of it, which, if nothing else, I'd suggest that you watch a clip of the beginning of the movie, or just go and watch the movie altogether.
Mhm.
They're in like a national park together, camping out while on some shore leave before the movie starts and they have to go on their mission. But then they get into like weird stuff where they give Spock a brother. And that's always the joke, is like, oh, the one where Spock's brother magically appears.
Oh, no.
And then they go find God. And what does God need with a starship is the famous line that Shatner says to God. So even, again, why such a Shatner movie is God, gets talked back to by James T. Kirk, because James T. Kirk ain't bound down to nobody, even this entity that could be God.
Wow.
So I like it. It seems like Total Recall kind of style with like one-liners and action, but it doesn't seem very Star Trek.
Okay.
And to me, it was just missing whatever that Star Trek thing was, because you already had The Next Generation on the air. You already had 2 of the best movies in the franchise out there.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what else Shatner directed. I really don't after this, but this was the last Star Trek movie he directed. And I'll just leave it with this, that while this is the bottom, the next movie coming up is my favorite of the entire series.
Okay.
So you kind of like go from like one of the best to one of the worst, and now you're about to have the best, in my opinion.
I also just looked at the cast, and David Warner is in this movie.
He is severely, severely underused. He has like 3 scenes, a couple lines, and that's it. But he is amazing in the next movie
Yeah.
we're about to get to.
But he's a different person. Is that?
He is Klingon in the next
Yeah,
movie.
because he's Saint John Talbot in this one, and I was so excited to see him in the next one. But then when I looked at this, I was like, wait a second, like he's
Yeah,
back to
which-
back.
That's normal in Star Trek world. There are some people like Jeffrey Combs who's played dozens of characters in the same series, let alone, in the different series.
Yeah.
So we just lost Tony Todd, Candyman.
Mm-hmm.
He played at least 4 or 5 roles throughout all of Star Trek, and he has some of the most memorable performances as different characters. So in this one, you can be underused in a movie like Part 5, and then they were like, well, he's so good, we gotta give him something, I'm sure. And he's back in Part 6, and he's fantastic in it.
Okay. You mentioned Jeffrey Combs and his multi-characters. I'm not going to ask you to name all of them, but I am going to ask you to explain something to me. So he plays Commander Shran.
Shran, my favorite.
Tiron? Tiron?
What is that supposed to be his last name? I'm not sure.
It's the first role he played on Star Trek. Not important.
Oh, that's somebody else altogether. Okay. No, Shran is his Andorian character on Enterprise, which is actually a reoccurring character throughout the entire Enterprise series. And that's my favorite person. But he did a lot of different characters on Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, he played Graham and Brunt and
Yeah.
Weyoun, Wyoun.
That's close enough. I think it's more of a Wyoun.
Wyoun, but then it says Wyoun 5, Wyoun 7, Wyoun
Yes.
8. What is that
Okay,
about?
so you never watched Deep Space Nine, did you?
I don't even know. I don't know what that is.
Okay, Deep Space Nine was the series that came on after The Next Generation.
Okay.
It is the one with Commander Sisko, and it's a space station. Man, it's so hard to explain. This is a character that whenever he gets killed, another of him comes. Like, he's basically a clone. And that's why it's got the number after it. The Wyoun, so many comes each time one gets killed.
Okay, that makes sense. So Deep Space Nine, where does that fit in the lineup of Star Trek shows?
So I'll just do this real fast.
Yeah, please.
The original series, and then about, give or take 20 some years, about 100 years later is The Next Generation.
Okay.
Now, once you start with The Next Generation, you have in real time, Deep Space Nine started about halfway through The Next Generation. And then The Next Generation ends and they start doing their movies as Deep Space Nine is going. About halfway through that, Voyager starts. And so Deep Space Nine and Voyager are on the air at the same time. Deep Space Nine ends, then Voyager has a couple more seasons, it ends, and then as soon as it ends, Enterprise starts. Now, Enterprise goes back about 100 years or more. I can't remember. Be gentle with me, Internet. But it's before the original series by like quite a while. And then once Enterprise ends, besides the movies that kept on going, you don't have anything Star Trek besides the movies. Until a few years back, they started with Discovery, which takes place right before the original series. About 10 years before the original series is when Discovery is. And then from that, you have the people who will go on to do Strange New Worlds appear in that, and it's a straight spin-off from there to Strange New Worlds. But you also have, they were doing these little short films for a while called Short Treks that I loved, that were just individual little short films. And then you also had Lower Decks, which was kind of like Rick and Morty style animation and comedy in the Star Trek world.
Okay.
And that actually picks up in the TNG timeline where like Voyager left off. So the last thing you saw on that timeline was Voyager. Lower Decks starts, it's in that timeline. And then you have a couple other shows that are coming out, and you have Prodigy, which is more of like Clone Wars, like Star Wars Clone Wars. And you had Star Trek Picard pickup, which was in real time, like the 30 years later, or however many years later from when you left Picard in Nemesis, his last movie. I know I'm just talking, and this is all like, like what people's like, what's he talking about? But everything has a certain timeline.
Yeah.
And so like the show Star Trek Picard lasted 3 seasons. It picks up in real time from the last time you saw Star Trek The Next Generation cast at the end of Nemesis. But whereas like Lower Decks, even though it's a show going on at the same time as Picard, its timeline is at the end of Voyager. So there's a little discrepancy of
Got
about
it.
30-ish years there. So you just got to be into all this on a finite level to keep track with all that, or you can just watch it for fun.
Sure.
And that's what I tell people. I know that scares people off. Just watch it for fun. You know, Spock and Kirk, man.
Yeah, I really like things where you have the enjoyment factor that you can just sit back and be like, yeah, this is wonderful. But if you want to dig deeper, then you can really kind of get into there. And I think that's fascinating. By the time when this comes out, we'll be just a week or two off of a brand new Star Trek. I think it's a movie with Michelle Yeoh. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was going to mention that at the end. It will be the first movie since Star Trek Beyond came out, which by now is almost 10 years ago at this point. That's crazy. It's been about 8 years or so.
Yeah.
And this is a TV movie, if you want to call it that. It's Paramount Plus. So it goes straight to Paramount Plus. But technically, whatever you would call that, because you get these big movies with like The Rock and stuff that goes straight to streaming. So it's a straight to streaming movie, but you wouldn't call that a TV movie.
Mm-mm.
So Section 31 is a straight to streaming movie on Paramount Plus where all the new shows are. And her character from Discovery is going to be starring in it. And Section 31. Now, do you know what Section 31 is in the Star Trek world?
Not at all.
Again, the very minute things. It started in Deep Space Nine, hearing about it, and then it has appeared in all these other entities since then. That it's basically the Black Ops version of Starfleet.
Oh, sure.
It's the dirty work that Starfleet doesn't want to do, they do. And it's just a way for the character of Georgiou to have fun and kill people, basically, because she's just a fun assassin, essentially, but still working for Starfleet in a way. And that's the most basic thing to go into it without going into alternate realities and everything like that.
Okay, perfect. Well, I saw that before every single Star Trek thing I watched in prep for this. So I was like,
yes,
now I have to see this. And so I'm looking forward to that. But let's make people wait no longer. It's time to talk Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, from 1991, again directed by Nicholas Meyer, who directed Wrath of Khan. I'd never heard of this. I watched it yesterday. There's a scene where Kirk invites Gorkon to dinner, and I enjoyed seeing how dinner dates go back in the day. And then when we were talking about casts, this has David Warner, Christopher Plummer, Christian Slater, Kurtwood Smith, John Stuck, Matthias Hughes. I mean, it's got aliens, it's got alien planets, it's got everything I want.
Everything.
I mean, holy smokes.
It's one of my favorite Christopher Plummer roles.
Yeah. Oh, he's great. He's phenomenal.
Did you enjoy it then? It sounds like.
Oh, I loved it. I mean, it was like kind of the third thing I think I'd watched. And I was like, I've never heard of Undiscovered Country. I don't know what this is. 91, I was very much kind of discovering like industrial. I was getting way more into music and paying less attention to the video store. And so aside from like horror, I wasn't seeking out a lot of things. And so I didn't know that this existed and thoroughly enjoyed, because I think the cast is just so good that every single person that popped up, I mean, I love RoboCop, so Kurtwood Smith being in something, I was like, this is great. Matthias Hughes, from like I Come in Peace, he was, great in it. And, as a kid that loves, give me an alien planet, give me like, there's like a whole cave situation. It's got a really nice pace to it. Like for me, this was like this, if I was doing my list, which very few people would want to hear, this would be up there. For sure.
Yeah. It is, like I stated, my all-time favorite of the original series. Mm-hmm. And I will tell you, I will give the spoiler, it's actually my second favorite of the entire franchise, but only because of one reason. We'll get to that later.
Okay.
This is just such a perfect 5-star movie for me. Everything you said is what I could say, but I wanted to hear you talk. I've talked so much.
I give you a break to catch your breath. Yes.
This is the farewell to the original series, the proper farewell to it. As we move on to the next one, we will get into like the coming over of some of the TOS stuff into the TNG movies. But this is the last proper one. TNG had been on for a while. at this point. The cast was getting older. You could tell Bones was not able to do the stuff he probably did in the earlier movies.
Yeah.
But he did damn good. He did
Mm-hmm.
damn good in this movie. But this was kind of like DeForest Kelly's last big thing. It was a lot of their last big parts. And half the cast is gone now. Over half the cast is gone now.
Yeah.
And it's so endearing in me that they did one fantastic last movie and we didn't go out on part 5. The end of this movie, Sulu, for people that haven't seen it, Sulu gets to be a captain of his own ship in this movie. And he comes and saves the day. That's huge.
Yeah.
Because, finally, he gets to do something. And at the end of the movie, as they're all standing there on the bridge of the Enterprise together, Shatner has that Peter Pan line of, what's the proper line? I always mess it up, of second star to the right or whatever, straight on till morning.
If I were human, I believe my response would be, go to hell. If I were human.
Course heading, Captain.
Second star to the right. And straight on till morning.
Yeah. And he says that fantastic line. And then as the credits come up, you see their signatures being wrote.
Yeah.
And it was their farewell to everybody.
So cool.
And to me, you couldn't have asked for more at all. They had been through so many entities from the original series, which got canceled like twice, and still kept coming back and was finally canceled. Then after they were canceled, they found out, oops, we shouldn't have canceled it. It was actually the biggest show that we had. We just had the wrong demographics in front of us. Then they had the animated series, and the animated series got canceled. Then it was supposed to be this show. That didn't happen. Then it became a movie. So they did all these movies. And they're, and this huge world has come around Star Trek, and this is their final goodbye, and they have all their signatures, and it's perfect. And besides that, it's a great whodunit storyline.
Yeah.
It's like Clue, like was it Kirk with the knife and this? It's just a fantastic movie, directed by a fantastic director. It was written great. This is another one where I say, if you're going to get into it, even though this is towards the end of everything with the original series, watch this one to get into it, because it'll hook you.
Yeah.
Just a great movie by itself.
Yeah, and that last sequence that you mentioned, it really is like you feel the weight of like these characters have been through so much together, and they're in this room agreeing to like sail off. I don't know, it's a very nice farewell to these characters that aren't going to be, carrying on in the next film. Yeah, I was really caught off guard by Star Trek.
I'm so glad you watched this one.
Yeah.
That's great.
Which brings us to Star Trek Generations, 1994. I have seen, prior to this conversation, none of these movies. Didn't see any TNG stuff. I wasn't watching the show. Like, I definitely watched way more Shatner stuff. So this was interesting. I knew Picard, obviously, but not many more. I knew Picard and Data, and outside of that, I didn't know anybody. So this was interesting to see. Malcolm McDowell is in this movie.
Yes.
Fantastic, directed by David Carson. You have the floor, sir. What do you have to say about
So did
this?
you watch this one in your preparation?
Yes, I watched all of these.
Okay.
But I had never seen any of the TNG cast films.
Oh, wow. Okay, I'm interested to get your impressions because I don't know if I've mentioned it already on this. There is a fan theory, and I don't know if I bought into it, but you could look at my rankings and see that it actually kind of lends to it, that it's the every other Star Trek theory. Have you heard of this?
Oh, yeah.
Where it's the even numbers are the best movies and the odd numbers are the odd man out, where it's not that good.
Interesting.
So like part 2, we went on about how great it is. Part 4, we said it was the funniest and the best.
6.
Part 6 is my favorite.
Yeah.
And now this would be another, kind of weird odd man out, where I'm just going to go ahead and say it. First Contact is one of my favorite movies, and definitely my favorite TNG movie, which is the next movie after this. One of the reasons I think this is a little wonky, and that I think that's a good word for it, wonky, tonally, or whatever you want to say, they wouldn't let this be a next generation movie. They had to bring in the original series somehow.
Right.
I don't think that they trusted in the next generation enough to just give them a movie.
Yeah.
I don't think that they thought people would go see it without Kirk in the theaters. Even though if you look at it, the original series lasted 3 seasons, the next generation lasted 7.
Yeah.
So by that alone, it was the current thing. So, but I understand you want to bring in Kirk and have like the changeover. Like, here's Kirk handing the baton to Picard after 7 seasons, but whatever. So they do it, and they try to bring in, McCoy, but DeForest Kelly said, he wasn't in good health at that time. He wasn't up for it. And you can really see when they brought in Chekhov in this opening scene here, that at one point he's doing medical work. You could tell that was written for Bones.
Yeah.
And they just kind of passed it off to him. I'm sure they would have loved to gotten Spock. They weren't getting Spock back, So they had Scotty, and then Kirk was your main person you're going to be with. Now I actually like the opening in this movie where it opens up. It's real time from the last TOS movie. They had settled down, and now they're on the Enterprise B. It's going to have a new captain. It's the best friend from Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Yeah.
Is the new captain for the Enterprise B. And Kirk comes on board with Scotty and Chekhov just for the news media is there, and it's going to be a farewell and a send-off and just a champagne christening, basically. And of course, like in every Star Trek movie that ever happens, they're not ready for something with the ship. The ship's not ready to do this. And oh no, something's happening. They are the closest there. They have to go now, even though they're not ready. At the beginning of the movie, Kirk is like being the Kirk character, giving orders over that captain, just like in part 1. And he runs off down below and gets sucked out of the ship. And that is forever in history how James T. Kirk died, getting sucked out of a ship on the Enterprise B christening.
Yeah.
So then it goes to TNG time. It does that time jump to TNG time, where you get your movie. It's like, we can start the movie now.
Right.
And finally, you get this, what could be a fun romp that starts off with them on the holodeck giving Worf a promotion, then becomes Picard just found out that his brother and his nephew, which if you've never seen the show before, are literal characters from the show that you became invested in, that you enjoyed their presence and liked their episode. Oh, they're killed off screen in a terrible fire and died horribly. So now, as a TNG fan, you're sitting there going, but that kid was going to be something one day.
Right.
We like those characters. Nope, killed, horrible fire. Sorry. And we sucked Kirk out of a starship.
Yeah.
Oh, man, this is not starting well. And so, but at least you get Guinan. and you get Mr. Clockwork Orange showing up, doing his best. We're going to die in the fire of time. And like, so you get some okay acting in there. It's very uneven tonally. And then you get the Duras sisters from the Next Generation showing up again, the Klingon twin sisters. So you're like, okay, well, I'm back in this. As a TNG fan, I'm enjoying this. Here's some more characters I know. And then Data gets his emotion chip, and you're not sure what to make of that. And he has a fun little moment with Mr. Tricorder, and he sings a little song. But the whole thing is just, it speeds up to where you go into the Nexus, and Picard's sucked into the Nexus, and that's where the main villain of the movie, if he's a villain, you could just say he's an uncaring scientist who only cares about himself, is wanting to get back to. And Picard's in there, and he finds Kirk, and so they work together to defeat the bad guy and save the day. But in that, Kirk gets killed. I always wonder, like, wouldn't it have been a better thing if Kirk lived and came back into the future and maybe had a whole second life doing the life that, because in the Nexus, he was in there with the woman he loved, the horse he loved, making some eggs. What if he either went back into the Nexus and had this great life in there, or he came out into the future and was like, okay, well, I'm going to now have the retirement I should have had and live the life the way I want to, or whatever he wanted to do.
Mhm.
Just so as a fan, you never have to see him again. You just know Captain James T. Kirk is out there living his best life somewhere. And it'd been great. But no, they just kill him
Yeah.
unceremoniously.
It's so
He's
weird.
buried under some rocks by Picard. Okay. Bye, the guy we've been following since the 60s. See you later. And then the movie just kind of ends.
Yeah.
It's no big joyous thing. It's no big great thing. Forever in official Starfleet record, James T. Kirk was sucked out of a starship. And as a fan, I'm not all about this movie. Again, it's not on the bottom of my list, as I said. And there's no such thing as a bad Star Trek movie because it has its moments. But man, it's such a bummer when you even talk about it and describe it out.
I know. It's like we almost just have to move on to the next movie, which is Star Trek First Contact from 1996. This is a movie I watched because of you, because of this conversation. Obviously, I can't blame you for Generations, but the movie that you talked about was First Contact. I just thought I needed a little context, which I didn't, actually, I don't think. It's directed by Jonathan Frakes.
The man.
And Alice Krieg is in this, and I think she's phenomenal. She's an incredible, incredible actress, but kills it in this. And you were 100% right when you said that there's horror elements in this.
Oh, yeah.
I did not expect Data to talk so much about cyborg sex. And I really like the fight outside the ship with Worf.
Oh, yeah, dude. The Worf got some in this movie. He was ready to kill
It is
some Borg.
cool. That whole sequence, I was like, this is awesome that they set it on this sort of iconic part of the ship. But yes, please tell us about First Contact.
Okay, so whereas the last movie was just kind of like, you should have just let them go and have their TNG movie and leave the TOS cast having their great send-off at the end of part 6. You have this weird in-between movie. Well, now with First Contact, it's time to go, baby.
Yeah.
This is a next generation horror episode. And I love it. It's a haunted house movie. It's a zombie movie. It's a fun action adventure romp. And whereas earlier I said, Star Trek movies, you got to have your little moral message in there. This is like one of the most actiony movies, especially the Next Generation cast. But it gives you the backstory laid in there that goes now throughout all of TOS and all the history forever of who were the first alien race to meet us on Earth. It gives us First Contact Day, which is still an annual holiday that we celebrate every year. And this movie just gives you so much. And Picard has this big breakdown, and he gets helped through his big breakdown by a great guest star in the movie. You have Cochrane, played by James Cromwell, Alfred Woodard, who's in all kinds of stuff now. And those are two great actors that are added to this cast. Like we were talking about earlier, people just line up to be in Star Trek films. And with them in here, they have some great scenes. They have some fun scenes. They have some horrific scenes, like straight up horror movie scenes like we were talking about. And for me, if I just want to have a fun night at home, just to pop some popcorn, drink a drink, pop in a movie, this might be it.
Yeah.
It has everything for me.
Yeah, I agree. The James Cromwell character even has like a full arc as a character when they go back in time and talk about how he created the warp drive. I forget which one it was now.
Warp 1.
The warp 1. I've watched so much Star Trek recently, and it's all the information is like spaghetti in my brain. But he goes from like, I don't want to be famous, I don't want to have a statue, to like actually realizing the important impact he had on like the world, which is pretty cool for a character that like hasn't been, for the lineage of the show. Yeah, the pacing of this was really fantastic. When you get to Alice Krieg's head being put onto the body, there's just really cool science fiction-y, horror-y, Cenobite type stuff happening in this movie that, like, from an outsider perspective, I was like, this is great. And this is what I want, not just as a Star Trek fan, but like as an audience of entertainment. Like, it just felt like what Jonathan Frakes was doing directorially here was just really helming a movie that like gives you the moments you want with the cast if you're coming from watching the show, but it also gives you just the cinematic feel and fun of a film. And it's not afraid to go darker than you think it's going to be or have conversations about how long cyborgs can have sex for. It's it's got humor in there and unexpected points, which breaks up the dark tones of it. So it's not uneven. I think it flows really well. And I gotta say, as a standout of watching these movies, this one really knocked my socks off. Like, it is fantastic.
I think it showed everybody, oh yeah, the next generation could be its movie franchise that stands on its own. And Frakes, as much as I love him as Commander Riker and always will, he knocked it out of the park as a director.
Yeah.
And it really showed everyone his chops that he has. So much so that like now every Star Trek new show that comes on, he directs some episodes, and he usually gets like the good episodes.
Yeah.
And he's just such the person you want on your team to deliver you the quality product you want.
Yeah, I agree. He also directs the next film, which is Star Trek Insurrection from 1998. What's your feelings on this one?
Okay, this one I think is unnecessarily, I don't want to say lampooned, but like, it's the one nobody talks about, or if they talk about it, they just go, it was whatever. It was essentially a long episode. It is a good episode, I think. And when you go back and watch it, there are fun moments in this movie. I enjoyed this movie. It's down on my list of films only because the other films I have up are so good.
Yeah.
It's like, if this was an episode, it'd probably be one of my higher rated TNG episodes. The thing about this movie is you just really got to know the behind the scenes that kind of bogged it down. And I won't go into all that on here. There's actually a whole book written specifically about this movie and the behind the scenes that kind of drug this movie down. But I like it. I thought the actress that they brought in to play off Picard was really good. I think, Patrick Stewart is a great leading man in these films. He's a great leading man in everything. But you got to think by this time, he had already been more than just Captain Picard to the world. Now he's Sir Patrick Stewart. He's like a leading man. And I think they wanted to give him a little more. I think they wanted to give him like a love interest. They just wanted more to do, basically. And I honestly, even though I was a fan and I was watching everything during this time, I barely remember this coming out to theaters.
Yeah.
Whereas like First Contact, it was everywhere. There were t-shirts, there were hats everywhere, buttons. You go into a comic book store or a video store, it was everywhere. Insurrection, where was it? Where was the advertising? I don't remember an Insurrection hat anywhere.
No, it just wasn't that memorable for me. I don't know what it was. Maybe just how late I saw it in my rewatching. I just was kind of like, oh, I don't know. Whereas the next movie had more things that I remembered. Probably of these, it's maybe if we were just doing the TNG movies, it would be towards the end for me. But that's fine. There's going to be movies that speak to you in one way and don't speak to you in others. So let's move on to Star Trek Nemesis from 2002, directed by Stuart Baird, who was a renowned film editor on everything from Listomania to Superman to The Omen, Tango and Cash. He directed Executive Decision and USS Marshals.
Yep.
Interesting choice for a Star Trek director. What is your feeling on Nemesis?
Okay. I have a very big soft spot for Nemesis. And you know how the whole thing is whenever you're younger and you like something, you have no idea other people don't like it.
Yeah.
Until you're older and you get told, wait, you're not supposed to like this. And you're like, oh, I'm not? Well, this was Nemesis for me. I loved Star Trek already. This came out, what year was this again?
2002. Yeah.
I was in my freshman year of college, and me and a buddy who also liked Star Trek went to the theater, had a fantastic time with it, loved it absolutely, came back telling everybody to go see it at the theater. it was the best thing I'd seen forever. This was so much better than Insurrection. This was, the best thing since First Contact. And even though it hadn't been that long, whenever you go from high school to college, it seems like the world had stretched, So we're telling everybody how great this movie is. Nobody else goes and sees it. Me and my buddy always wondered, shout out to Phil, me and Phil always wondered, why doesn't anybody ever talk about this movie? It wasn't until like 10 years later, I'm on, what I call tricky Twitter, where everyone's kind of railing against this movie and how not good it was. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Now, going back and watching it now with some time, I can see where people were upset that this was the last hurrah for the Next Generation cast. At the time, walking into it, I'm like, this is just the next movie.
Right.
Of course we're going to have another movie. What are you talking about? It's 2002. The future is wide open. We didn't realize that it would be till 2009 until we had another movie. And this was it for the Next Generation cast as far as we knew, forever. Starlog didn't tell me that week that this was the last movie.
Yeah.
So I liked it. It has Tom Hardy in it before he was ever Bane or any of that stuff. Has Ron Perlman in it in a fantastic role.
Yeah.
I think this is one of his best.
He's great.
And that was even before Hellboy, because Hellboy came after this.
Yep.
So to me, it was the guy from Beauty and the Beast, in that makeup. And I'm like, dude, this movie rules. You get the very sad ending of Data.
Yep.
But you have, his brother counterpart, whatever you want to call him, which at the main end gives you hope of like, oh yeah, Data's still around. One thing about this movie that's always stuck out to me is the dune buggy scene. Like, why does the Enterprise have dune buggies?
Yeah.
I don't know. You have hovercrafts you could just use or beam to where you need to go. I'm trying to remember. It has a really rad death scene for like the entire Romulan council or whatever on there. So there are elements in this movie that are really cool. And in the fine tradition of reusing sets, like a lot of the TOS movies would use the TNG sets. This used some of the Enterprise sets, which was like the newest show on at the time. And you could like sit there, if you really paid close attention, and you're like, yeah, that thing from Enterprise. But overall, I really always enjoyed this movie. But I think if they knew this would be the last one, they would have done something extra.
Yeah, because they didn't know. It's not like the characters were so old or the actors were so old that they were like, we give them a big send-off type of thing. It just ends up being the last film for this section of the cast. I don't know. I enjoyed it. It was hard to live up to First Contact in my rewatch, if I'm being honest.
Oh, yeah.
There was some stuff where I was like, I could probably do other things right now. Like First Contact, I couldn't stop watching. I had to stop it because I was working on the show notes for this episode because I wanted to watch the movie. Whereas this and Insurrection, I didn't have as much of a problem being like, it's okay if I leave the room and come back kind of thing. So, but yeah, that is the final film for this cast. So it makes sense that we hear another song by Boldly Go. This is Never Give Up, Never Surrender.
Swallow
And we're back, and it's reboot time. It's 2009 Star Trek, directed by J.J. Abrams. I found out that the concept of a younger cast on Starfleet was floated around as early as 68, and then again in the 80s, but this is the film that really is like, look at these young William Shatner and Spock and everyone you love, but it's not them, they're younger. I remember seeing this as a jaded person in 2009 and calling it, like everybody, lens flare the movie. I rewatched it now, and I like these actors for the most part, most of the cast, but this feels like a Mission Impossible movie more than a Star Trek movie to me. I don't know. Again, I'm not the expert here, but what's your feelings on to the 2009 Star Trek?
Quick question. Do you realize you just made a Leonard Nimoy joke? Right after the original series, Leonard Nimoy went directly to Mission Impossible.
That's so funny. No, I had no idea.
So, and forgive me if I sound a little mushy when it comes to this movie. I can't help but be connected emotionally with this movie. Here's why. This will be my moment of, like, if you haven't had enough of me already, you're going to tell me to shut up after this. Let me put you back in the world of Star Trek fans. 2002, we got our last movie, Nemesis. We didn't know that was the last Next Generation movie, and then one just never came. And we're like, well, crap, I guess we're never getting another one. Enterprise, instead of going the regular 7 seasons, got 4 and was unceremoniously just canceled. If you don't know, there's a lot of people that hate the final episode of Enterprise because they inserted Riker and Troy watching everything in a holodeck simulation.
Oh, gotcha.
As the last episode. They said that it was, in their mind, a way to say goodbye to all of Star Trek that had been on the air since the Next Generation started, because this would be the end of all the shows going, and just bye, everybody. But instead of giving Enterprise a great finale, which the Next Generation has held as like one of the greatest finales of all time, it was just kind of a whimper. And so much so that Scott Bakula was furious. And when the show ended, he just left. He didn't do any celebrations. He just did his contract, did his last scene like the professional he is, and left because he was probably going to punch somebody. But that's how much it pissed off Scott Bakula, which by all accounts, my hero, Scott Bakula, is like the greatest guy ever. So unceremoniously, just got canceled after 4 seasons. So there's nothing. It's just barren wasteland of Star Trek. The DVDs are coming out. You're watching the DVDs as they're coming out to rewatch your favorite episodes.
Yeah.
It's before the days of streaming, so you can't just binge watch them unless you got that big DVD box sets or all your old VHSs. And then you start to hear that there's a new movie with a new cast that's going to be Kirk, Spock, and everybody in it. But it's all these new young people. So immediately we're all just jumping to, oh, this is going to suck. Oh, it's going to be an action film. Oh, they're going to screw this up. But then you find out Leonard Nimoy's in it. He is actually in the movie. Well, okay, but who's he playing? Is he in it for a minute? I don't know. And I don't know if you ever heard the story of how they premiered this. They didn't let people know that Leonard Nimoy was in the movie at all.
Yeah.
I think it was maybe a South by Southwest or something like that. They showed a screening of the movie early, and then Nimoy appeared and did a Q&A, and everybody freaked out. And that's how the world found out that Leonard Nimoy was in the movie. And I really think that bought them a lot of goodwill, that people were like, okay, well, he didn't even do Generations, so if he's in this, maybe it's something. And then everybody went out and watched a really freaking fun movie. Like, this is what you want to sit down with your bucket of popcorn in the theater and see. It wasn't a long-winded speech from Picard, which I love. I'm here for all day, but some people aren't.
Yeah.
If the guy's just wanting to go see Tom Cruise in a Mission Impossible movie, like you said, hey, this is the next best thing. Pass popcorn. But where they did it right was instead of just remaking everything, they caused what they call the Kelvin timeline, the alternate timeline, where, the Romulan ship came back in time at a certain point to where it was the day that Kirk was born, and the Kelvin was the ship that his father ended up basically saving all the crew with. Once he got put in command, the captain got killed. Kirk's father got put in command, and it was Thor before he was Thor, before
Right.
anybody knew him.
Yeah.
And he saved everybody's life. And that first 15 minutes of that movie, I will put up against anything ever. That first 15 minutes with Thor in command.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Did that not make you a little emotional to watch whenever you were watching it?
No, I was trying to put it all together, and like hearing you is fascinating to me because I'm like, oh yeah, I totally get what you're saying and how that would strike you. But like I would be that person that would be seeing this movie and not knowing. I mean, obviously
Right.
I know what Star
Right.
Trek is, but it's different than when you're really like my brother, where it's like there's, books, anything that's Star Trek is what you're like you want,
Right.
and you're memorizing all this stuff. I had a question to ask you later on during our ranking, because he has down Star Trek 2009 Kelvin timeline, and I was like, what the hell's a Kelvin timeline? And then you just told me, which makes total sense, and I'm like, of course that would have an emotional resonance, because this all makes sense. But I had no idea. I was just like, got it. And I was just excited Simon Pegg was doing something after Shaun of the Dead, so I was just like, that's why I was there in the first place. So now rewatching it, I was looking at all the different effects and things. But yeah, that makes sense.
So this started, like you were just saying, the Kelvin timeline, because that was the name of the ship. Kelvin is how it got its name. This didn't erase what they call the prime timeline of the original series, TNG, all that. This is just an alternate timeline. And if you're a sci-fi fan, not even a Star Trek fan, but a sci-fi fan, it's all about alternate timelines and time travel. And that's essentially what this movie was a time travel movie. So now you see what these people's lives are like with this one event that happened that shook up everything. And you could see it through all the movies of how like things would be different from what you're used to in the prime timeline because of that one event.
Yeah.
And also what remained the same, interestingly enough. And so I've always been a fan of the Kelvin timeline films, starting with this one. This one is my favorite. I'll go ahead and spoil it. It's my favorite because on an emotional level, I connect with it. That opening 15 minutes is the best of anything, I think. I think you can sit anybody that doesn't know what Star Trek is down and show them this movie, and they're like, oh yeah, Kirk Spock, I'm in. Cool. It's fun. It's funny. It has everything. And then you get the connection to the original series, pull at your heartstrings from the Leonard Nimoy actually appearing as Spock in this. So as a fan, you're like, well, you have to choose pretty much. Like, am I going to put up my shields and not want to accept this? Or will I at least give in and be like, oh, they're Spock. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so this movie is just, it's got everything for me. I think it's the perfect starting point. And for me personally, it had been such a dry period in between stuff. I watched the final Enterprise episode live. I remember cooking tacos and having my buddy over, watching it that night.
Yeah.
And that long of a stretch of about 5 years or so with no Star Trek at all, it was joyous to have something back on the screen and something on again. Even though you just like everybody, you're like, I want another series. I want this. Why didn't they do that? Why didn't they do it? I was more than happy with what we got. And it also brought people back into getting into Star Trek again. People went back and watched those series. People went back and watched those other movies. There was so much merch around this, and I'm a big merch guy. You were asking me about collecting stuff.
Sure.
I'll get really into like really niche stuff and want everything for this. So I'm a collector of the Kelvin timeline stuff. I have like all the comic books. The comic books started again with IDW publishing and still going through today with IDW. And it started with this era. Some of the best stuff has come out in this era in comic book due to this. And some really fun toys have come out. One of my favorite tie-ins for this was the Eggos. Do you remember the Star Trek 2009 Eggos?
No.
Like you would get them, and in the middle, it was like a printed. Those like waffle makers you can get now, or toasters, and they'll have like the Batman logo in the middle. It looks like they just did a bunch of those with a machine of like either the Enterprise or a really bad Kirk or a really bad Spock. Yeah. And you would put them in your toaster, and they'd come up. They look terrible, but it's Eggos. I'm like, this had everything.
I had no idea, because it also led to the second one, Star Trek Into Darkness in 2013. When I first saw this movie, I was like, we're on an alien planet. We have an alien race. There's like a volcano exploding. There's like, it's all the stuff that I want in a movie. Like, if you can go where man has never gone before, show me that. Like, I want to spend as little time on Earth and as little time in a spaceship as possible. I want to see fantastical worlds. So I loved the opening sequence of this. And then it got into like, there's a sick kid, and they started having space meetings, and Peter Weller's there because I love Peter Weller, but I was just like, I want to go back to the bright colored alien worlds if we could. I don't know. This movie had the biggest drop off of the newer three for me. But that's just me being spoiled rotten with a huge action sequence straight out the gate.
You are exactly right in what you feel. As in, a lot of people felt that way. Still to this day, a lot of people don't like Into Darkness. Even if they like 2009, they didn't like Into Darkness. Here's the thing. I remember sitting in the theater and sitting there and going, okay, I enjoy this, you know, and not having the big thing. But it wasn't as joyous to me. It didn't have the feel of 2009 that struck me that I just spent forever going on about.
Yeah.
It was fine. Now, after like 4 or 5 viewings, however many times I've watched it over the years, the thing that sticks out to me, and you're going to laugh, it's funny.
Yeah.
It's actually really funny. It's got some great comedy bits in it, mostly due to Simon Pegg.
Yeah.
And
when he's talking to the alien in the bar,
yeah,
it's a great sequence.
My favorite character that came out of all this is Keenser. And that is Scotty's little buddy that's always with him. And Keenser is my dude. I just ordered a Keenser figure that just came out. He's my dude. I love Keenser. People say, what's a Keenser? Just watch the movie. It's Simon Pegg's little buddy. But this movie, if you know that there's going to be a whole kind of darkness, like in the name, Into Darkness about it, and it's going to get in some pretty heavy things, but then like just take in the movie as it is and enjoy the comical bits. It holds up. I enjoy it every time I watch it more than the previous time. And I will point out a couple of things that I like about this movie. There is a term in Star Trek around the fans called a badmiral. And I was going to actually name Boldly Go Badmiral before somebody was like, no, dude, Boldly Go. And I was like, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
And what a badmiral is a bad admiral. Because ever since the original series, you always get the admiral who comes onto the ship and is an asshole, and everybody's like, we don't want to do the thing that the admiral wants us to do, but he outranks us. And it turns out he's crazy. Well, Peter Weller does that fantastic in this movie.
Yeah.
He is one of the best badmirals. And you can use him as an example for everybody when you're trying to explain that term. I did really like the Khan aspect of it, because that's something we haven't mentioned yet. This is a remake essentially of Wrath of Khan, but how it would have went down in the Kelvin timeline, because they didn't have their space seed, because this was a different timeline now. And so it kind of merged space seed with Wrath of Khan, and you got this whole new thing of how they encountered Khan. And I think it was done really well. They flipped it at the end to where, you know, instead of Spock dying, it was almost Kirk dying, because you had to do something. I figure that was just in my own assumptions, like, well, everyone's expecting Spock to die at the end. Yeah. You had to do something. They flipped it on its head. Now, if you took out the Khan stuff, you took out that ending, I think a lot more people would have liked it. But it was kind of, in my opinion, a damned if you do, damned if you don't. This is technically Star Trek 2. Everybody expects Khan. If you don't give it to them, everybody's going to complain. If you do give it to them, everybody's going to really complain.
Yeah.
So, all in all, watch it for the comedy. Simon Pegg rules.
Yeah.
I like this one.
And it's got a great cast. Again, I know I sound like a broken record, but they're all phenomenal in it. Which brings us to Star Trek Beyond from 2016, directed by Justin Lin, who did a bunch of Fast and the Furious films. I think I felt that. What's your feeling on Star Trek Beyond?
Star Trek Beyond, I heard somebody right whenever this came out say this, and I really feel it. It is a great episode of the original series. It is a modern, all the money you can throw at it version of an episode of the original series in its best way possible. And that's why I think it's not the greatest movie of the series. I don't think it's even really like a middle movie of the series. I think it's just a really great, good movie just to sit back and watch. You get to see Kirk questioning everything just like he did in the movies. Like, because even in the first movie, especially in the second movie, he's like, why am I out here? Why am I doing this? If you go back and watch The Cage, the pilot episode of the original series, you get Captain Pike saying, maybe I should have gone and done something else with my life. So they're doing that trope. But with Kirk in this of like, I joined Starfleet on a dare. Now what?
Mm-hmm.
I succeeded in every way I ever could. And what's left for me? And he's kind of depressed, like, I'm now older than my father ever was. You start the movie with that and then throw them in a crazy situation, and through it he has the realization of, no, this is where I'm supposed to be with my family, like where Kirk is, in those movies. So it follows that same kind of trope, but the special effects I think are the best in anything. I think the makeup was fantastic. I love Idris Elba in this movie. I do think he's a little wasted behind the makeup. You got Idris Elba.
Yeah.
But still, he's fantastic. That voice is so recognizable. And even under all that makeup, he's fantastic. This was the last one for the modern Chekhov before he passed away, which was really sad to see.
Anton Yelchin, yeah.
He had done Green Room with Sir Patrick Stewart, and then this, and a couple others. But this was like a really nice farewell to him. Unfortunately, he did pass away. And so when you watch it, you always go, well, how are they going to do the next one? Which, this movie ends on a really great ending of like hope of like, we're watching the next Enterprise be built. We're going to have a great adventure next time. And then knowing that Anton passed away in real life. And then there's been so many scripts that came up and then went away. And then nothing's happening again. It's been almost a decade.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think about. But in the meantime, we've had all the shows I was talking about earlier from Discovery on that kind of in the last 8 years picked up the ball and ran with it. Now we're getting this new movie straight to streaming, but it is tied directly into Discovery. It is a Discovery movie, essentially. So while this was the last theatrical film, nobody expected it to be. You really thought that there would be a part 4 going on. And when you bring in people like from the Fast and Furious franchise, like what you're talking about, it's like, oh, yeah, we're going to have 5, 6, 7 of these,
Yeah.
And it's going to go on. And you felt that. And you did feel the action adventure in this one more with the dirt bike jumping and everything. And so you felt that Fast and Furious thing in it. But again, that goes with you want the people there for the popcorn buckets.
Yep.
They love Fast and Furious. They go to all 20 million of those.
Oh, yeah.
So you want them there.
Yeah.
But then you also give the Star Trek fans what they want. And I really think this last one of the films is a really good in-between. Not what I would have went out on. Just kind of like how I felt about Nemesis. Good movie. Where's the next one?
Yeah. Well, and it's shocking, like, with the popularity of, huge blockbusters, like we've mentioned, Mission Impossible, but like the comic book films, the Marvels and all that stuff. I mean, Star Trek has a built-in fan base that, like, there's enough living people from all these different aspects that if you did your metaverse or whatever they did with Spider-Man, Spider-Verse, you could do something that would be respectful of all these characters, but also give us something new. I don't know. It just feels like we're due for the next big version of what Star Trek is.
I hope in my heart of hearts that they continue on with Kelvin somehow and give them at least one final movie. One big talk was they were going to bring Thor back to be side by side with his son through somehow parallel universe, however they were going to do it.
Doesn't
Star
matter.
Trek rationalization.
Yeah.
But the budget was going to be so high on that's what ended it. And that was the closest we got to it. Since then, we've had directors come and go, scripts come and go. There was a whole lot of talk about a Quentin Tarantino script
Oh,
that was
yeah,
never
yeah.
going to get made.
Right.
I love Tarantino. I'm a unapologetic Tarantino fanboy. I love him. I'm just that guy from that age. I love Tarantino. He would never in a million years get his script made that he wrote for a Star Trek movie. So we've had so much stuff happen that people never just put their faith into it anymore. So hopefully the Section 31 movie is going to go really well for Paramount streaming, which you never really know about streamers anyways.
Yeah.
Netflix will release something, say it's the greatest numbers you've ever seen in your life, and you've never heard the movie.
Yeah.
Here's hoping. Hoping.
Same. That's all we have is hope. Well, that concludes our run. So let's celebrate with one more track from Boldly Go. This is No Win Scenario. And we're back, and it's time for us to share a ranking of the Star Trek film franchise from last to first. Again, my list comes from my older brother Ryan, who loves Star Trek. So remember that, people. If you want to attack him, he's not on social media, so good luck fighting him out there. So number 13, do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first? With
I want to hear your brother's list.
Okay.
I'm really interested.
So number 13, so this is the back end, and much like yourself, he loves it all. So this is a personal ranking, which means the ones that connect to you the most are at the top, and the ones that are at the back are only there because the other ones are so great. So number 13 on his list is Star Trek Final Frontier. And again, I don't know why. So this is just, if anyone's listening and has their own list, They're all going to be different. So what do you got?
Guess what? Final Frontier.
Ah, there it is. Okay. So
It's number 5, the William Shatner movie.
Yep.
It's the bottom of the barrel, man.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Shat. It's the bottom.
Number 12 on his list is Star Trek the Motion Picture.
Okay. I could see that. I would not, and I am not putting it there.
Yeah.
But I can definitely see that. It is a little long-winded.
Yeah. But what do you got at 12?
I think now I just made a Letterboxd. Anybody wants to find me on letterboxd.com/FilesRotten, I'm on there, and I just recently updated my list on there to find what I put a lot of time and effort into. I've completely forgotten to pull that out, so now I'm just doing it on the
I love
spur
it.
of the moment.
Yeah, yeah.
And I have my 4Ks with me here, and I'm pulling up each one, and I'm going to go Insurrection for the next to last. Again, there's not a bad Star Trek movie, but Insurrection will be the next to last of the least good.
And like you said, sometimes it's just how much you return to something. And sometimes you're going to return to other films more than others, even though, you're not, like you're saying, it's not bad. Number 11, he has down Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home.
I do not see that at all, sir.
Isn't that crazy?
That is wow.
I love lists like this because it's just what connects to people. And for some reason, Voyage Home was not his jam, but maybe that'll take more shape as we get closer up top. What do you have for number 11?
I'm gonna go the motion picture.
Okay.
Only because we're now getting into movies that are really hard for me to rank.
Yeah.
And this is probably the closest to the bottom I can get without saying I like this movie, but the slowness and the pace of it takes a toll after a while.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Number 10, Star Trek Nemesis.
Okay.
What do you got?
I do not have that. I'm now literally looking at my 4Ks going, oh,
Hello.
it's so hard. I'm going to go, I was just praising it, but I will say this. It's probably, the next up will be Into Darkness.
Okay.
That's
a nice steel book there.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Number 9, he has Star Trek Insurrection.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can see that. It's already been on my list, so I can definitely see that.
Mm-hmm.
God, I'm having such a block right now.
It's going to get really hard for you on the fly.
For the record, none of these are even remotely like at a bottom of the list.
Right.
These are all just now in the good spot, but which one's best?
Mm-hmm.
I'll throw Nemesis up there again.
Yeah.
Like I said about Beyond. Good movie. Where's the next one?
Yeah. Next for 8, he has Star Trek Beyond.
Okay. You know what? I'll just go ahead and match that. Star Trek Beyond.
Nice.
I think we'll match.
Number 7, Star Trek Into Darkness.
Okay. I understand that. It's already been on my list.
Yeah.
So now, yes, I'll have. Oh, okay. Generations.
Okay.
We'll go Generations. If I didn't mention this before, and I don't think I did, this is a fantastic Christmas movie.
Okay.
Because in one scene, Picard stands in front of a Christmas tree.
Oh, there you go.
So there you go. Christmas movie.
That's all you need. Number 6, Star Trek First Contact. Yeah,
Man.
I know. I'm
Okay.
like, wow. Having just rewatched these, I was like, okay. But like you said, once you get up to these like top 3s and stuff, it's like, well, I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
What do you
Okay.
got for 6?
3, Search for Spock.
Okay. All right.
3, Search for Spock.
And maybe with these lists, I mean, there's different. I mean, he was definitely a big fan of the first series, and then TNG and stuff because he's older than us. So it might be just an age thing. Who knows? Other than personal taste. Number 5, he has Star Trek 2009: The Kelvin Timeline.
Okay, at least made the top 5. Okay, so now we are officially, like you said, in the top 5.
Yep.
So all these are like 5-star movies for me.
Yeah.
So
It's impossible. They could shift on a
take
day.
these-
Yeah.
Yeah, great assault. We'll do part 2, Wrath of Khan.
Nice. Number 4, he has Generations, which you already talked about.
I have First Contact.
Okay. Just us re-talking about that is like, I'm probably going to rewatch it again.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So 3, he has Of his top 3 Star Trek films of all time, he has Search for Spock as 3.
He must love that movie way more than I do.
Yeah, I
I don't know,
think
Christopher
the
Lloyd or
age
something.
I think the age he was at when he saw it probably, when you're a
Yeah.
kid, sometimes you just connect to something and like there's no shaking that. Like as you get older, you rewatch it and you're like, no, this speaks to me. I don't know what to tell you. But yeah, number 3 he has Search for Spock. What do you have for number 3?
Star Trek 4, aka the one with the whales.
Yeah. Yep. Same. Number 2, Star Trek 6 Undiscovered Country.
Okay. You know what? Star Trek 6, Undiscovered Country.
There it is. And his number 1, you've already mentioned it, but, you already know what I'm going to say, is Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan.
Yep. And mine is Star Trek 2009.
Whoa! That has to be... Is that controversial in the Star Trek community?
Actually, I'll take this moment to shout out a couple of my favorite podcasts.
Oh, please do.
That I have appeared on. Is there's Weekly Trek, which is a weekly Star Trek news show that's fantastic. I suggest it to everybody. Weekly Trek, and then my favorite Star Trek podcast, and just a great, amazing, fun time altogether. It's kind of bi-weekly. Is a show called Trek Ranks, where you get a topic from Jim, the host. He's also known as Enterprise Extra because he was an extra on the episode of Enterprise one time.
Rad.
And it's just so fun being on the show. I've been on about three or 4 episodes, definitely 3 I can know of right off. And you get your topic and you make a top 5 list and of this topic. And one of the episodes I was on, the first episode I was on, was Star Trek for a Rainy Day, which is literally what's a good episode to watch on a rainy day. And your prime directive is your prime directive. He puts nothing on you other than that topic. So if you want it to be fun, do you want it to be heartfelt? Do you want it to be whatever you want it to be? Just an episode for a rainy day, top 5. And my number 1 was 2009. And that's where I really realized it was my favorite movie and entry point, because I talked to all about how it's the best thing to show somebody, and on a rainy day you just want to have some fun, just pop it on.
Mm-hmm.
So, and he's told me recently, and he's talked about on the show, that 2009 is one of the most picked entries like into Trek Ranks. So many topics you could put that movie into, because it's not only episodes of the show, it's also the movies. So big shout out to Trek Ranks. Check him out. And yeah, 2009, while it's still to this day, some people don't like it. A lot of people have come around to it, and a lot of new fans, newer, younger fans, that was an entry point for them, definitely. And a lot of people just love it as just a fun way to get into it.
Yeah. Wow. Fantastic. I am shocked. And after hearing you talk about the film, I'm not shocked, but it's unexpected that it's not Kirk or Picard. I mean, classic Kirk, William Shatner, or or Picard at number 1, but there you go. I love it. There you have 2 personal rankings of the Star Trek film franchise by 2 people who love Star Trek. Foz, please tell people one more time where they can find you and buy your music.
Okay. Boldly Go, my Star Trek punk rock band. You can find us anywhere. BoldlyGoBand.com has all the links to everything. You can search Boldly Go on any streaming platform, Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, anything you want, Amazon. We're on there. And me personally, you can find me at Foz Rotten. I've been, 20 years on the internet as Foz Rotten. So look up an old blogger page. You'll find me on there as that Foz Rotten. I'm everywhere from Twitter, Blue Sky, anything that'll have me, I'm on.
Fantastic. Thank you for being here, sharing your love of Star Trek and your music.
Thank you so much. I'm a big fan again. I just want to say thank you for having me.
Oh, that's awesome. I'll now throw to one last song, which is one of my favorites off your release. So we're going to go out with It's Nightmare, Twist of Khan.
You stopped me on this planet. Ain't no prince out panic. You stopped me. again, yeah, you're suffer too. No escape. Fuck again, crew, cause nightmare that's still alive. Nightmare that will never die. Nightmare that will steal your life. Nightmare from City of Fire. Go! Nightmare that's still alive. Nightmare that will never die. Nightmare that will steal your life. Nightmare from City of Fire. Left you on this planet exactly how I planned it. Didn't know it was all a rose. I escaped, now so did you. Talk all you want, but I pay no mind. Time for death, and now you're mine. For you anywhere to the end of time. Christmas pain, for his crime comes nightmare that's still alive. Nightmare that will never die. Nightmare that was still alive. Nightmare from City of Fire. Nightmare. 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 Nightmare.
As always, I'm Dirk Marshall, and this has been VHS, where when it comes to celebrating rad films and even radder friends, we're not done yet.